What's going on, advocates? Welcome back to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Joined today with me is a collective, and I love the mission and the work that these fellas are doing because, and we'll get into it in a deeper sense because I want to ask both all of their opinion on it. But just seeing brothers come together for a common goal, a common reason where they could have each been in their individual silos and off to their own. They decided to come together to bring this collective together. I don't introduce anybody. Trey been here before, so if y'all go back, you can go listen to an earlier episode that we had together. But you please introduce yourselves. I'll start with we start with Trey, we start with Chris, and then James.
Bad. What's up, world? My name is Gary Trey Taylor, licensed clinical social worker out here in Virginia. Thank you, Reg, for having me back on the podcast. Owner and private practice owner of Uphold 31A, which I do provide therapy to Black men and women. Been doing that for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. I'm a podcaster, author, dad, husband, sneakerhead, a whole bunch of different titles, man. So glad to be here with my homies, y'all.
My name is Christopher Scott, and I'm a social worker out in Portland. Started social work years ago. I have a platform called Hip Hop Social Worker where I do a podcast here and there. You can look that up if you want to hear, all the stuff that I did. I met these guys on social media, had them both on the pod, and really figured out that we were pretty similar and kind of, trying to do social work our way, not really, letting people tell us what we should do, what we should be doing. And now we building a collective, hopefully to add more men, in social work so we can really build out and go nationwide. But until then, it's us three and we're going to hold it down.
My guys. So good afternoon, James Bell III here, also known as Doc by the brothers here. Let's see, what am I? So I work for our state health department. I'm a policy guy, big picture thinker, all about macro social work. So as people start talking about individual level issues, I typically tie it back to a system that people live within and the choices that they're allotted. I'm also a podcaster, also a creator. Just, I like a lot of the same things that these other brothers have mentioned. Sneakers, not as into cars, but I would like a nice Beamer one day, like my good brother Gary. Just all around.
Ditto.
Now,
come by mine.
So I just was looking it up to make sure I had the notes, but Trey's episode is episode 58. If you all want to go back and listen to that, please check it out. He got into a lot of different conversations as well. But Chris, he mentioned something that I wanted to dive into, doing it your way. What does that mean? Especially like right now, I got a paper due by the end of the night, but I'm in school now and I got the luxury of being able to practice and being out here and hearing information from individuals like yourself. But also now I got to go back and study these theories from older non-Black men and women who teach these theories where I'm like, something don't match up because what I'm seeing here versus what I'm reading is two different things. So what do you mean when you say therapy our way or doing the work our way?
So it's like you said, theories, throwing those theories out the door. You know what I'm saying? Like we really don't need them. Not in the work that we do and the people that we see. People say, oh, well, you should do this. If you want to be a therapist, you can't, do this in session, or you should look like this, or you should talk like this, so really just showing up as me, what I'm saying? Not code switching too much. Of course, you got to code switch a little bit, what I'm saying? But really minimalizing, the code switching and things like that. Like having a practice where, my profile picture are like my professional, what they call those headshots. I might wear a do-rag. I might wear a hat. What I'm saying? I might wear J's, show up in Jordans. I might talk about rap in my sessions. I might do a whole lot of stuff. It depends on what I want to do, right? Of course, being ethical, but yeah, just not really letting people say, hey, you should change your vernacular if you're going to see more clients, or you should do this, you should do that. Now I'm going to do it how I do it, just kind of making my own path. I feel like, I spent too much money on a degree to try to fit into some kind of box I don't want to fit into, so.
That was good. If anybody want to comment on it, they can. I do have a question for James that kind of connect with that as well.
No, I was just gonna say it's really about normalizing like being yourself, right? Like instead of subscribing to other folks' models or the way that everyone else has done things, really just be yourself. Like show up as who you are. Communicate the way that works best for you. I don't get to speak as much to the clinical aspect, but even in policy conversations, realizing like the choices that people have are built around their environment, right? And if you've never stepped foot in that environment, you can't speak to the choices these people have. And so for me, in those spaces, it's about being authentic and saying if a family has to choose between paying a bill and getting dinner, I understand why they have to get dinner, but we should be talking about why they have to make those choices in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so as we show up as a collective, is really challenging folks to start thinking broader about the way they have to make decisions. And when we talk and work with institutions, it's about what role have you played in creating these scenarios. So you need to take a step back and say, hey, we own up to we've created this, therefore we should be a part of the solution to fix it.
Trey, you got anything?
Just echoing those sentiments of everybody says. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons we started this collective, because we all shared the same interests. We wanted to, tap into these spaces and do social work or help people the way we wanted to help people that looks familiar to us. And so I think as a result of that, us kind of doing it individually, it was like, well, shoot, we can come together and do it our way, and we blend, the micro, the meso, and the macro all together in one. There's a no-brainer. If I can give you the clinical piece, Chris can give you the clinical and community piece. I can give community as well, and then Doc can give you more of the policy side, the bigger picture side, all that together. Then there's a no-brainer, I would say, in order how we could do this thing our way. And so I think that's where we kind of met in the middle at, and started to kind of be more vocal around these are the things that need to change in order for our community to thrive. If you want to get more Black folks in therapy, if you want to get more Black people in the field, these are the things you need to be looking at. So absolutely.
No, I appreciate that. James, I wanted to come back to you because you spoke on the policy piece. And you answered a little bit of the question that I did have, but I'll go at it a different way. What is one thing that you wished our community knew about policies and in connection to mental health and treatment that we don't speak about often?
One thing. I think the biggest thing is when we talk about legislators and people who have to make decisions, they don't really care. And when I say that, they're surrounded by so much information at any given time. And I know we may have one cause or one thing that people are just passionate about, and we're like knocking down their door, like, if you would just do this, we could have a better behavioral health system. They have 2-3 years to make a big change before they get turned over when they're preparing to run again. I think what I wish folks would know is just the urgency in your message, right? Like, I hate that it falls back on us as the advocates to say, hey, we need to get this point across, but that's also what we signed up for. I think it really boils down to the message has to be strong, the data has to be compelling, and you have to show them why it's important, right? Like, who's being impacted by this problem? Because if it's just like some random, Joe Blow on the corner, they're not going to respond the same way that you personalize it and say, this is impacting your community in this way. So a lot of the times as we're doing work around policy and advocacy is really trying to get folks to understand. And when I say folks, I'm referring to decision makers, to understand these decisions that you all make have real life implications for people, right? Like real life implications for folks that we work with. And so when we start to make those decisions and the broad sweeping decisions that just generalize the experience, people fall through the cracks. And those people that fall through the cracks are people that we typically work with or work on behalf of. And so what I want people to walk away with is you have to tailor your message to a group that doesn't really have a lot of time or concern for what you're trying to express, but getting the point across so accurately that they feel nothing but compelled to move. And that's a really fine balance. Like, it is not an easy task. Because I know I've walked out of meetings and I didn't get what I wanted, right? Like I didn't get the policy change that I was looking for, but I planted the seed, and I have to think of it, broadly in that way. Like, hey, was I able at least to get them to say the thing back to me that I wanted them to capture? And so a lot of it is really just timing. It's understanding that it's a long game. Policy change is not quick. I wish it was. It would be a lot better system that way. But it's really about, taking your time and understanding who you're talking to.
Man, anybody had anything they want to add to that? Well, I'll go into and I got you. I'll go into the other side of that too, and I'll pull Kristen and even Trey. You can answer as well because you talked about the community piece, and one of the frustrations. All right, Trey, we just talked about like being on tour and going into the community and like being outside and trying to provide resources, and then sometimes it's like, man, this is such a great resource and people are not coming towards it, and so talk about the navigation of that because even with I'm trying to be politically correct, but I'll say it plain. Like even when white people come and say, "Hey, we got these free services for you," or "We got these type of services," take advantage, and then certain people like, "Oh, that ain't for me," or they don't want to come in and take a part of those resources. It kind of make it seem like we don't need these resources, if that makes sense. If I'm putting it all together, talk about that community piece where we ask for certain things and then people bring certain things, and then the frustration that come when we don't take advantage of the certain opportunities that come our way.
So I've had the privilege of doing a lot of community work in the last couple of years around working with our topic of our like black men or the black mental health scene and in the communities or just in general conversations around community and discussions. I've did some speaking engagements and specifically working towards that. And I think there, as much as I told one person, this person asked this question to me, they was like, "What do you do when you show up and you do these type of events and spaces and the participation is not there, even though it's a great resource, you got all of this, everything they're looking for." And I say, well, I'll talk to the wall when ain't nobody in there. Because at least somebody's going to hear it some way or fashion. You know what I'm saying? We'll figure it out. We'll get in there. And I think it's about timing. I think it's about timing. I think it's about placement. And I think it's about understanding that planting of the seed. There are many people I feel like who I could do like free support groups, speaking engagements, podcasts, or whatever, will not listen, won't go to a therapist. But if I put it in a package a certain way, they'll catch it. They might not comment on it. They might not say nothing, but they'll come like pull me to the side or catch me on like I'm in the store like, "Yo, man, I see what you're doing, man. I appreciate that. That's been real helpful for me." But won't never say a word about it in the community or on social media. And so I think you have to understand when it comes to black mental health or black health in general, and community resources and things that we need, that because we've been hurt for so long, because we've been swindled for so long, because we've really never had all the full resources, it's hard for us to engage and hard for us to trust on many levels. Even us within the systems of which we operate in as clinicians or community advocates, there's still a big trust level that we have to establish with people. So even in our own community. So I think it's all about perseverance, placement, timing, and understanding. Like Doc said, sometimes you're only just that seed planter. You're not the one who grows it.
I'll go back to that. So I do think there is even amongst each other, right? Like when like a whole bunch of white people came to the community and said, "Hey, we got this stuff, what I'm saying, for you, saying like, here, use it." They might not trust that, right? But then if I came to the community and said, "Hey, I'm a therapist, I'll give you free therapy," they don't really trust that either. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's because it's not hard evidence that therapy is going to work. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So like, I feel like, I don't want to get too political, but I feel like, everybody that I talked to that had, that was kind of like, anti-vaccine, right? They always say, well, if I can still catch it, then why do it? Right. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's what, like, with mental health and everything, right? Well, if I'm still going to be sad, then why go to therapy? I'll just thug it out. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's a lot of that. There's not hardcore evidence that these things are beneficial, you know what I'm saying? Because life is still life. There's still a big system that we gotta, fight against and all that, right? So I have an example of just like how, at least in my community, how Black men see just kind of being vulnerable, right? I was asked to speak at a grief kind of seminar, right? And there was only 3 Black men there, and it was me, and I was speaking, the cook, and the photographer. Everybody else who attended that seminar was Black women, you know what I'm saying, or women in general, you know what I'm saying, because there was some white women there too, right? And it was, and it kind of, and then even the cook, because he got up, you know what I'm saying, and said some words because he was dealing with grief, right? His brother had died, right? And he was doing that for 5 years. He said himself, I don't know why more men aren't here. I knew men right now that are going through something that will not show up. And he asked a question, you know what I'm saying? I feel the same way. It was like, I didn't even realize it, because I feel like everywhere I go that's mental health related, is always a whole bunch of women. You know what I'm saying? There ain't a whole bunch of men that show up to these things. And I just feel like, you know, like this, it's like a trauma response. We just don't trust anything, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard for us to really break down. Like, I mean, like, I'm impressed that Trey has that he has a practice full of Black men, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like that show up, because it's like, man, like, because I've been doing therapy, and I feel like I get a few that come here and there, you know what I'm saying? But it's like after the 5th session, they done, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, so it's just, yeah, I just think that there's still something missing, you know what I'm saying? Of course, and even like if you had like a therapist seminar, I bet everybody who show up will be therapists. You know what I'm saying? Like, all the men that show up will be like therapists talking to each other. Like we don't need that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I need this person to show up or that person to show up. And I feel like it's really hard to get that. It's really hard to get that message across. You know what I'm saying? And I've been trying, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like people will see me in the street and ask me for suggestions and stuff like that. But if I say to show up to therapy, you know, it's really like a 50-50 crapshoot, you know? So I feel like the lack of trust, the lack of hard evidence, you know, like we Black, we need hard evidence. Hey, is it working or not? You know what I'm saying? Because if it's not, I got other things to do. You know what I'm saying? And that's just, I mean, right now, it's just the way it is. Hopefully it'll change one day, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, that's just kind of, it's just hard to really get that message across, that yes, it might not be, you know, like, you might not see rewards, you know, for years, but, you know, it really takes, you know, time off your stress, just coming and sitting for an hour every 2 weeks, you know.
James, Trey, did y'all want to add to that?
Yeah, let me before Doc go. Now what I will say is this, because I'm not tooting my own horn, but I've seen some different things in reference of trying to get Black men in one space. I was successful doing it with Goodfellas Project, and I see what Black Men Hill doing as well. And then I have my private practice. So the notion of that we can't get it to happen is not as far off as we think, but it's going to take a lot of components to hit right. So my thing about it, I talked about in one of my podcasts, was like, of course, I always talk about you have to build a trust, safety, and rapport. That's the first thing. Trust, safety, and rapport, either on a personal level, community level, or whatever topic you're talking about. You got to get that piece of it. Language, language of how you're marketing and talking to the ideal client, which might be the Black man or Black population in general, Black women, Black children, also matters. Even though I feel like for Black women, it's a lot easier to get them into these type of things versus whether it's a Black women's retreat, business, therapy, hit, like women, they got this thing on lock right now. You feel what I'm saying? But trust, safety, and rapport is your biggest thing. But then I think I go deeper until I start talking about, is there a sense of community there? Sense of community, a sense of safety in the realm of pride, and how are you speaking to that Black man or that Black person? Are you speaking to them that empowers them? Because a lot of times when we're like having these resources and these events, we're not speaking to that person that we want. We don't have speaking to that Black man to come. We're speaking to him to his faults. He already knows he's at fault. He's already know he's not doing what he's supposed to do. Matter of fact, he might not even know what to do. But just because you put the resources in there, don't mean, you know what I'm saying, he gonna take that. So are you speaking to that brother who can feel it and understand, like, okay, they actually speaking to me and what I'm going through, because I can't put words to it. And I think that's the other piece that we miss. I get that question so much about just how do we get more men in therapy? How do we get more black men in therapy or black men into these places? It's beyond therapy, resources, community events, whatever it might be. How do we get? Are you speaking the language that speaks to them to get them there? And that's hard. That's hard. It goes way deeper than this. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a lot of elements that go into it, and it's very strategic if you're gonna get us around. Because you got to think about it. All of us are podcasters. You know, got degrees, jobs. You might put something in front of our face for like 5 minutes. This jump finna hit for you. It's gonna work for you. You be like, yeah. And then 3 months later, you come back to it, and you was like, oh, you know that thing you gave me not too long ago? That joint was work. It's just us. But if you put it in there, you package it a certain way. I think that kind of draws the man. That's my thought. It's hard though. It is hard.
I honestly feel like so much of it is trying to push the way we've been trained to do things on Black men, right? Like I think of an example. I was doing a training in a workshop, and it was like a community forum, and we were talking about safe sleep, but we were only talking to fathers and predominantly Black fathers. The questions that they had outlined didn't go with what the men were experiencing at that particular time. Like they didn't want to talk about safe sleep. They wanted to talk about the fact that the friend of the court had been harassing them. And so what I watched in that particular space was as my colleagues tried to veer back to the outline that we had, because that's what we were paid to do. But we didn't give space for Black men to talk about their issues. And so now when you do that in a variety of settings over and over and over again, what does it look like for me to come into a clinician's office after I've been more or less told that there's no space for me and my problems to talk about the things that are impacting me? And so what we have to do is disrupt that model and say, okay, outline is cool over here, but right now, I want to talk about what's bothering you, like what's impacting you, what's keeping you up at night, what's stressing you, because that's going to inform the work that we need to do anyway. We're still going to get the goals that we've set out in the long term, but we're actually creating space, right? We're creating space to have a difficult conversation. If a brother tells me like, hey man, I don't have a job, I owe this much in child support, my rent is due, I completely understand why you haven't been able to do all these other things, because you're stressing about these things over here. And if I work in a system that discourages you from talking about those things, then I need to use my own power, like my own privilege, to say, hey, we're never going to get the people that we need if we continue to push them to the side and their issues. And even if the agency that I'm a part of isn't responsible for solving those particular issues, I'm sure there's some email address that I can pull up and say, hey, my man's got issues with transportation. What can you do for him? And that takes me, 2 minutes? But for so long, we've been discounted and pushed to the side. No one wants to do that for us. And then we already proud as it is. So it's not like we asking for a handout, but it's saying, hey man, I want to help you because I see that you are concerned about this particular thing. I want to make sure that you can get that solved.
Man, y'all both just all three dropped so many gems on that, especially with that safety, security, and like that it's the words you use, Trey. What's the third one? What was the third one you used? Because that was the rapport.
Rapport.
That's the one that we've learned at Black Men Hill, and all of the things that we do is we just came from Atlanta, and the one thing people were coming from Mississippi, North Carolina, New Jersey, flying in. It was, hey, I've seen you at this event, or hey, I've seen you. That rapport is so key in relationship, because we put out a Facebook ad. It had 150 signups. None of those signups came out. None of those signups. It was the people you had rapport with, built relationship with, and built some type of connection with that got you to come out. So y'all speaking facts, because it just showing in my mind like, oh, that's why people mess with you, is because they mess with the relationship that you all have. And speaking of relationship, and I want to ask all of you that question, is one of the things that I struggle with is getting men within the family to, not come across, but start to adopt a different approach to life. There we go. That's a better way of saying it. And they've been so accustomed to what that definition of a man has been for so long that it's hard for them to shift that. You all could put it out in whatever way and answer in any way that you want. But I wanted to ask that, like, how do you navigate that? Because you can see from your perspective of what damage they're causing by internally or externally, but it's almost hard that that's your family member. So you kind of got to be gentle with the relationship, if that makes sense.
I keep it real. I'm gonna keep it 100% real. I don't try. It is not my place to try. They are when we kicking in, when we politicking. They didn't sign up for therapy. They didn't sign up for nothing. So it sounds it sounds real. It sounds real. You know what I'm saying? Harsh, but it's like I have boundaries. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want. You know, I don't. I mean, we'll put it like this. Like if you know if mom and dad asked me to talk to my brother, you know what I'm saying, and like, hey, you gotta talk to him, man, he's struggling, I'll try to reach out and I'll ask, how you doing? If they tell me fine, then it's fine, you know what I'm saying, and that's all I can do. You know, I do have family try to talk about foster kids, and you know what I'm saying, I had an aunt that probably tried to get me to take a little cousin as a foster kid, and I just couldn't do it. I can't. I have my own kids. My house ain't big enough, you know what I'm saying. You know, and it's just like, it's just those things, because like, you know, back in our days, you know what I'm saying, like grandmas took a lot of kids, right? You know what I'm saying. And I feel like now the whole dichotomy of family is kind of thrown off, probably because of the policies that was in the 1980s that trickled down to the 2000s and the 1990s and stuff like that. But you know, but just to answer your question, yeah, I the way I navigate it is to stay out of it. You know what I'm saying? I will suggest that they see someone about what they're going through, you know what I'm saying? But I don't want to open myself up to be the family doctor, you know.
Trey, Doc, whichever one.
That's a little bit loaded for me. I you know I talk about it. I don't talk about it directly because I do a lot of talking anyway. And so by the time we start talking about getting into family, you know, I don't have enough at that point to provide. But I will say a lot of family members do look to me for that information. So like my stuff, like my books and stuff like that, with my postings, you know what I'm saying, that helps kind of bridge the gap. Now I got some cousins that don't even want to go to therapy but would love to talk to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I can't do it. I can't. Like, we cousins. Like, I know too much about your life. But, you know, it's like they trust my judgment. So they'll ask me, like, okay, what about this person? What about this person? Friends that I consider family, the same thing. Um, Saying, you know, I take it with a grain of salt, man. I know, like, me and my dad have, as I've learned, me and my dad have had conversations over time about how he's handled me with certain things and how I've handled him. Anger, joy, resentment, happiness. We've had heavy conversations like that because you know those elements show up in my marriage and my wife, you know, and childhood with you know raising my children. And so I had those conversations, but and then he's read my book, and so he's learning a lot more about himself, and you know, with what he can as an almost 60-year-old black man. You know what I'm saying? So because a lot of my older black men are you know they're stuck and they grew up a certain way, so you can't really fault them. You just allow them, give them the space to grow. And so then you know anybody else, it's like I might give a little if they in need, and let that kind of grow and manifest, give them the resources, be a shoulder here and there. But I have to set that boundary, and it sucks. But because, like Chris said, we pour out so much, right? That by the time I get into my house and in my family units, I don't want to be the doctor. I don't. I just want to be Trey. I just want to be Trey. I don't want none of these credentials. I just want to sit here, watch the game, eat food, kick it, talk trash, whatever, and that's it. And oh, you need some assistance? Here you go. We'll take the book. You know what I'm saying? So I still have ways of doing it that's not direct. My approach is more indirect, especially with family.
It's a jewel.
I feel like people in my circles see it through my boundaries, like so through my actions, right? I can think of ways, like since I've started therapy myself, there's certain things that I don't let slide anymore. So when people are talking to me about specific things, they'll say, hey, you know, we're not gonna do that here, or we're not gonna talk about this. and giving them that reason why. So, oh, you know, years ago, and, you know, you talk about people that have known you for a while. It's like, oh, you would have been all in on that. And it's like, well, you know, I'm in a different place, a different headspace right now. And I can't do that because I know what the long-term ramifications are. And so for me, it's people are like, oh yeah, so what prompted that? And it's really starting to, that's the education moment for me, right? I'm not about to tell you, you know, the long-winded answer of why we can't do that. It's like, oh, if you're really honest about breaking generational curses or what it means to be a man, you have to be able to adopt a new mindset. And so for me, I'll give a really quick example. Earlier today, my wife and I, we were talking, we were planning out the week, right? Like we're trying to figure out, you know, who's cooking on what day, who's going to be primary parent on which day. And my son wanted to talk. Like he really wanted to like say something. And so I looked at him, I said, not right now. He fell back for a minute, but he came back a few minutes later, still wanting to talk, wanting to intervene and have his moment. And I told him to go upstairs, right? As he was leaving, I could see him, like his eyes started getting watery, you know, he's trying to like calm down. And in that moment, I could feel it consciously happening. Like you think about the way that you were treated or you were raised. It's like, you know, boys don't cry, like man up, I didn't do anything. And I decided, you know what, that's not what I want to do here. So I went upstairs behind him. I apologized, which my dad would never apologize to me. And I took the time to be like, hey, you know, mommy and daddy are trying to have a conversation. We want to hear what you have to say. So I tried to validate and affirm him, make him excited and say, hey, we'll be done in a few minutes. As soon as we're done, we'll call you back down. In my mind, when I was growing up, that's not masculine, right? That is appeasing to feminine traits. And it's so embarrassing because now I'm constantly weighing out like, this is the way I was raised. This is the way I want to raise my children. Mm. And so a lot of the times when we talk about like family being involved in that process, like, what do you want? Like, do you want to perpetuate the things that you experienced, or do you want to create something new for your children so they don't have to go with what you went through? And so much of that for me is like, nah, I gotta disrupt. Like I can't continue to do the things that were done to me, because sure, my child might be in therapy years down the line, but I don't want him talking about the way that I neglected him, right? Like I don't want him to talk about the ways that I made him feel bad for having feelings. I still struggle with crying myself as an adult. But when I saw tears starting to go through his eyes, I knew he was having an emotional reaction to something that I did. And the way I was raised, parents don't say sorry. I led with sorry. And so for us, it's really about changing the narrative around parenting, around being a man, around what it means to show up, like even to be a husband, right? Like all of those things, the things that I saw growing up, I can't do that because I saw what the outcomes were. I want better outcomes for mine and the people around me. So if people are interested in that, we can have that conversation. But I'm like Trey and Chris, I'm not going to be your therapist. I can just say, hey, you know, you got to create some boundaries. You got to say, I'm not going to do this. Or you say, hey, I don't want to continue doing the things that people did to me.
Listen, y'all, they going to charge for this tomorrow. So please get it for free today. Like I always say, they going to charge tomorrow. One of the questions that, because I wanted to make sure we plug in the podcast as well for all of you all. So let's start with the Equity Matter Pod. Talk to me about the Equity Matter Pod. What can people expect from it?
Hey, so now's a really good time if you want to start listening, right? So the podcast just turned 2 years last week, and I'm at a crossroads. I'm like, okay, how do I keep this thing going, keep it fresh, keep it interesting? Next month, which I realize is August, is tomorrow, I plan on dropping what I'm calling a podcast mixtape. So it's called I Got Five, and it's based on conversations that I've had probably over the last year or so, where people, want to hear me do a solo episode, because typically I do guests. I find it easier. You know, it's just easy that way that you get people and say, hey, what's going on your mind here? With this particular series, it's just me. And I'm taking 5 minutes to dive into some deep shit, right? Like I'm trying to take 5 minutes to unpack why you shouldn't do privilege walks at work. I want to talk about why we don't do the cross the line exercise because it's trash. I want to talk about all those things in 5 minutes or less. And I'm doing a video component because people realize video is where it's at now. Like I got to see you. I got to see what you're talking about. And so if you're joining Equity Matters going forward, look forward to a lot more video content. I think I'm going to slow it down toward the end of the year, but I got plans for blowing it up in 2023. Stay tuned. I can't drop too many gems yet. But if you want to go back, right, you want to go back on Equity Matters, a lot of it is really unpacking why does inequity exist in a variety of spaces. So when we talk about inequity, for me, I come from a public health lens. I'm a social worker, but I talk about typically like why certain groups experience disease or experience these things more than others. And a lot of it can be traced back to like simple things. And by simple, I mean racism, classism, sexism, like all of those isms show up in our various spaces. And what I learned was that it's not just social work, right? It's people who work in transportation, it's people who work in, housing, it's people who work in all these spaces, but we all have this joint experience of the fact that equity matters. And that's what drives people to do this work. And so for me, it was really just having conversation with people that I respected, people like Trey. I still got to get Chris on there. That's a busy man right there. But getting people to really appreciate and value that there are champions out in the work. Like everybody isn't just showing up to keep these systems in place. It's people out there trying to disrupt, burn that shit down because that's what they know they got to do. So that's what you get when you listen to Equity Matters.
Appreciate you. Talk to me about the hip hop social worker. What's going on, Chris?
Man, so I started this podcast because I wanted to really get my voice out there so I can start doing more public speaking. And I feel like that. At the time I was doing another podcast with my friend, and I was like, man, I should just do a podcast about social work, right? So because that's my career, and that's something I could do, like, to kind of, like I said, build my platform so people can like look and say, hey, so what do you do? And I can say, well, matter of fact, I have this podcast if you want to hear how I speak or what I talk about. And so that was really the whole idea, was like, I can have some evidence, like if I were ever to be approached about a project, I can say, boom, I have a podcast about that or something. So, and it really just became, at first I was going to be real like mental health heavy. Here's tips to sleep better and all that kind of stuff, right? But I was like, what? I really want to talk to people about social work. I want to talk to more social workers about social work, right? So like that became a thing. Like I just reached out to a lot of social workers, and they kind of came on the platform, and they and they talked about social work in their area, social work, like their expertise. Because of course I had a lot of therapists on there. I had a lot of clinical talk, but I had a lot of people that were working homelessness camps. I had a lot of people that worked in in the community. So it really became just nice to hear how social work is in every state that I touched, right? And so it really just was something to kind of explore my own career, my own kind of like flaws, and anytime I had like something going on, I went to podcasts, right? So like when I turned 36, 37, or those age, well, I will be 37. Like every birthday I have like a podcast episode. I think I have a 34, 35, and 36, right? It kind of tell me about, the year that I've had. I remember I got laid off of my job. I talked about that. I talked about failing my LCSW exam. Talked about that on my podcast. And then I have, guests like, James and Trey, they come on, talk about their, expertise. One thing that I'm proud of, I had a lot of women on my podcast. I sort of created a women, or, like a women-led podcast, or, platform. And I had a lot of Black women on my podcast talking about all the, dope stuff they was doing. So like, I feel like, that's one thing I'm like, what, people can say what they want, but, I had a lot of voices out here, and it wasn't just like, popular voices. It was just, really like grassroots people that was like, boots to the ground, not like, people that's trying to, expand their, platforms. People really talking about the work they do, like, working in hospitals, working in shelters, working at, schools, right? So yeah, that was really just exploring my own, social work, exploring others, and that's what it became. I'm thinking about maybe doing it again, but right now I'm just chilling,
Now we all could probably understand that podcast breaking that grind. So go ahead, Trey, talk to me about everybody. Relax.
Man, everybody relax. Wow, 80 episodes. I did not know it had that many episodes. Everybody relax. I don't know what I'm doing with everybody relax right now. I'm in a kind of a hiatus. kind of break, I want to pod, but I don't want to pod, kind of one of those things right now. But everybody relax. Was one of my brainchilds when I first started. It was my first solo podcast. I've been podcasting since like 16, 17. And this one, I really wanted to make it focus on social work, mental health, and then kind of bringing my clinical expertise and mixing with the real world things that's going on, teaching and educating people about what mental health looks like, what social work looks like, what therapy looks like. I also explore my different struggles and challenges as well in the field, personal struggles. Sometimes I'll I threw my wife on at one time. Had a really good episode on about that, about marriage and stuff. So I kind of just think outside the box and think abstract. My whole biggest thing is like making sure we understand that mental health is every day. Mental health to get on this podcast today. Mental health is a daily thing we deal with on everyday basis, and it's in everything that we do. So I try to make that known. I always come from a social justice lens. Everything I do is from a social justice lens. So I do a lot about that, talk about my experience around that in the community level, grassroots level. I had real big success on doing more to my credentials where I interviewed these guys and some other clinicians out there. And we just chopped it up about their work, but we didn't talk about their work. Like, yo, outside of these credentials, who are you? You feel what I'm saying? Because I like a lot of times we think like, okay, well, these credentials define who we are, and that's it. Nah, I'm not these credentials. I'm a LCSW. I'm a social worker by trade. I'm a therapist, but at the end of the day, I'd rather just be in a coffee shop drinking coffee and talking about kicks and cars. You know what I'm saying? I'm a dad. So I got 2 kids. I'm a husband. I got my wife and my friend. I just like kicking and joking and watching basketball and stuff. So that more to my credential series humanized people. And I was very proud of that because I really was happy to humanize clinicians because even in that stigma around the mental health field, folks think like, we not human, we not regular, we can't make mistakes. You know what I'm saying? So we human too. Just because we got credentials don't mean we not human. So that's everybody relax. I don't know when the next episode's coming, and I don't. But it's coming. I got some ideas coming up. I might go different. I'm thinking about throwing some sneaker stuff in there. You know what I'm saying? Flirt with some other stuff. I'd rather be. I don't like to be boxed in, so I like to be creative and open with my stuff. So yeah, I do got some stuff coming with my Patreon though. That's gonna be more so with business owners, that's our mental health professionals, social workers, and then hopefully people who are supervisees looking for clinicals. So that's about it.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate all you brothers coming on today. Of course, I got one final question, and I had another one, but I want to make sure that we get this one in, because of its significance and its importance of having this conversation. Because we started off this whole interview talking about like luxury, almost like cars, talking about having sneakers and things of that nature. What do you all individually say to people who say therapy is a luxury or healing is a luxury, where it's so expensive, it's so like I can't do that because it's expensive, or I can't do that, but we can afford sneaks, we can afford kicks, we can afford cars, we can afford these different things. And I don't never want to come at it as a your grandpa coming at you, boy, you could do this and you could do that, but you don't want to afford this, but coming to shifting a mindset around it and shifting an opportunity. Like I started getting massages, or I started getting facials, or I started getting these other things where I just thought it wasn't I didn't see the benefits of it. And I think I just want you all to answer that question from whatever perspective you want to take it, because I think there just had to be a shift in mindset as opposed to a condemning of like, well, if you can do this, you can do that. Like, talk to me about that.
Y'all mind if I jump in first? Because I know y'all got the bomb answer. So let me get out the way first. I always look at it as the opposite, right? The neglect of doing these things is much more expensive, right? Therapy, it's a bill. Don't get it twisted. But the absence of therapy is far worse. And so I think back to like when I first started working, and I'm like, man, I'm paying way too much for insurance. This is crazy. But then I started looking at what my bill would have been had I not had insurance. Like, okay, yeah, I can drop off this copay. That's fine, because I don't want to drop $1,200 every time I go to the doctor. And so when I think about it that way, it's like, okay, sure, you don't go to a therapist, but you're spending money on alcohol. And that, I'm not here to shame nobody. You're spending money on Tree. Again, I'm not here to shame nobody. I'm spending money on shoes because it's something that brings me joy, right? But it's the fact that if you don't take care of your mental health, you're going to try to find another way to fill that void that's going to cost you a lot more down the line than had you taken the time to drop off that copay to talk to somebody that will give you tools. Just throw that out there too, tools and frameworks for addressing your issues. Like, oh man, you telling me that I can start to reframe the way that I think about this particular issue. And when I do that, it's going to benefit me in the long run. If I say, you know what, my kids is getting on my damn nerve, but my therapist says, hey, maybe that means it's an opportunity for you to lean in and spend more quality time with your children. And so instead of you being in your office mad with an attitude, you can be with them, among them, seeing the things that they enjoy doing so that you can do it with them when you feel like they're getting on your nerve. The cost benefit is there. And so when you take the time to look at it that way, yeah, I'm going to choose therapy every time. All right, now y'all kill
it. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I got it. So, I mean, the immediate answer, like if they're talking to me about therapy and they want like my services, I always throw it out. Well, I do offer a sliding scale, right? You know what I'm saying? Because even just keep it real, you know what I'm saying? Like anything over like, $60 an hour, it's a pretty good wage, you know what I'm saying? And that's how I think as a therapist, you know what I'm saying? And mainly because I do it as a side gig, right? So it's not like my main source of income. So I'm not, so it's not really a big deal if I have a client or not, right? So, but like what JB said, like if they're talking to me about it, I do, try to like, dig a little deeper. So, okay, so you said it's expensive. So what's like, what's going on? You know what I'm saying? Like, are you sleeping? You know what I'm saying? How important is your sleep? You know what I'm saying? Because eventually, you know what I'm saying, if you're so stressed out, you're going to stop going to work. You know what I'm saying? Like work going to stop. That's how these things work. You know what I'm saying? Like if you keep neglecting yourself, you ain't gonna be able to work, and you're able to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like our relationships is going to be, dysfunctional because you just so pent up and you need that space to kind of let loose. You know what I'm saying? Like once you kind of see that, and you start experiencing those things, you know what I'm saying? Like the $100 an hour ain't really going, sound that bad, right? So I'm trying to help you prevent those things from happening, you know what I'm saying? Because in our community, you know what I'm saying? Like we like to do a lot of like restructuring, like instead of like, prevention, right? You know what I'm saying? So this, same thing, I said earlier, you know what I'm saying? There's no evidence to prove that this is working or not, but I like to kind of, like just break it down, you know what I'm saying? Like, man, you are struggling. Like you just told me you can't sleep. You told me that you get upset for little things. You told me that you're stressed out and you need somewhere to vent. I know it's a lot, but you know what I'm saying? Like how important are these things to you? You know what I'm saying? It's different if you don't have any money to squeeze, right? Like if you ain't got no money to squeeze, you know what I'm saying? Then that's fine. But I also like to say like, okay, if it's too much money, call your insurance, work with a therapist, because a lot of like me, a lot of therapists offer sliding scales. They just don't promote it. You know what I'm saying? They have to, you have to ask first, and then they'll tell you, okay, well, this is what I do, right? So I like to really try to like show them resources. You know what I'm saying? Go to a community center. Because sometimes, you know what I'm saying, like they'll do an intake and, say they'll cover the whole thing, right? You know what I'm saying? If you make a certain amount of money or whatever. So I like to like put out the resources, but I do also like to like, talk about these are going to have a lot more effects in the long run if you keep neglecting it. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you're trying to see a therapist, just because, I just want to talk for an hour, then that's different. But if you're really telling me that you stressed and you're aggressive and you beating up people and you're doing all these things, I'm going to say, okay, if you end up in jail, you know what I'm saying? That's going to be a whole lot of, money. Like you're going to wish you could pay $100 an hour, you know what I'm saying? So that's really trying to like paint a picture, just really try to sit down and say, hey, if this is what you're going through, I would, maybe see a therapist. And you don't have to, like you could even do like, 1 or 2 sessions, get what you need and, try to triage it, right? You know what I'm saying? Like just because you sign up doesn't mean you have to go for X amount of sessions, right? You can see them, whenever you want, right? You know what I'm saying? You be like, okay, that's $100. I call Trey again. Hey, Trey, I know it's been a few months, but man, can I get in? You know what I'm saying? Now he might have room. He might not have room, but it's better than the alternative of, dying early of stress, hurting somebody, hurting yourself, and just kind of living, like just in a ball of, just like tension, right? So I like to like, point out, these are the things that are going to happen if you keep neglecting yourself, and it's going to be something that money can't fix.
Yeah, echo all those sentiments. And as the full time therapist, and I will say that I have the conversations up front. This is what it's gonna cost. If you can't afford it, then we got to do something else, or we can find another resource for you, find somebody else that might be able to cover your sessions. Um, we have those conversations because it's important. And I had that conversation first session. Let's just talk about it now before we get out the way, because I'd rather you see if you can afford it in the first session versus doing 5, 10 sessions. I can't do this. You know what I'm saying? Let's be realistic up front. And I think because we don't, as a black community, we don't be realistic up front about our money. And I'm of the mindset I try to practice what I preach. So just tell me the cost up front, see if I can rock with it. You know what I'm saying? We can do 1 session a month. If my rate, I don't offer sliding scale, but I do have a piece where we just kind of talk. Like, can you do half tomorrow or half 2 weeks, like something like that, once a month, bi-weekly, every 3 weeks, monthly, whatever you want to go into. We can do it weekly. But I've had okay success with my rates in my self-pay clients. You know what I'm saying? They pay the rate. So to say that we don't pay the rates is that myth is gone. That we do pay the rates, but I think it's about, again, trust, safety, rapport, fit, budget. I don't even think it's a piece of can I afford it or it's too expensive. That's I think that's an excuse. Do we have a budget for it? You feel what I'm saying? And so the other piece I say, like, okay, well, instead of you coming off a debit card, coming off the credit card, unless you want to go that route, if you got an HSA account, a health savings account, um, or something where you can take it out pre-tax before your check, boom, that covers that. At least you have that card. You can use that card. That's money you don't even see. So if sessions like 135, 115, take out 50, 60 each check, boom, it covers your session. You know what I'm saying? You're good to go. So, because obviously, and it's funny because, like I said, you could tell if you're buying J's, you know what the price of retail J's is. I don't even care if you're wearing mids or lows. It don't matter. It still gonna cover your session. I don't care if you're wearing like Flays, Air Force Ones, $90 a pop. You know what I'm saying? That's still a session and get a session in. So, you know what I'm saying? And then, so we can see the varying levels of spending. It's just isn't in the budget. You feel what I'm saying? And so if it's not in the budget, that's cool. We can make up this alternative if that helps. Or, we can figure out something, talk to the therapist. Like, I think we need to talk more about money in that aspect to kind of see how we can, make that thing shake. But then a lot of times too, people don't know they can use the H as the health savings account. They don't know the benefits of the insurance that they got. So some people like, I got insurance. I got insurance. You paying all this money for insurance. Then you get to therapy, they don't cover nothing. You got to come out of pocket anyway. So now you come out of pocket for the sessions on top of your health insurance every 2 weeks. So now you got to go have a conversation with HR. What type of plans y'all got going? I'm paying $150, $200 or whatever, so much every paycheck, but I don't get no therapy services, or it's not a copay for that. So it's a big financial piece of education, understanding around it. But rather you do the preventative work now before it's too late down the line. It's the same thing I talk about in healthcare, taking care of your bodies. Rather you do your annual checkups every year to catch something before it gets too late and it costs you too much. And I'm talking about cost, not just much as money. I'm talking about time, energy, and your body and your health and your mental.
Man, when you brothers dropped that jewel, I was going to ask if y'all have any final thoughts before we get out of here, but I think y'all kind of summed it up just now with those answers, because it shows the urgency and the affordability if you try and actually put the initiative out there. And please go subscribe and leave a review and comment on all these brothers podcasts. It means a lot. I know from my experience. Share about like how this is going and share a gem that they enjoy that they dropped on here. Like, oh, I heard this or I love this. Because it helps with everything that they have going on. It helps amplify their voices. Anybody want to leave anything short that they want to leave the people with?
Oh, Reggie, before we go, I just want to let you know, even the Brothers and Social Work Collective, we talk a lot about mental health and well-being. Our biggest piece is the consulting side with institutions and agency and businesses helping them with DEI initiatives, recruitment and retention of Black social workers. We're working from schools right now, trying to get things done so we can come out there, speak, consult, do a lot of trainings around DEI, but also like recruitment and retention of Black social workers and helping social work programs understand that your accountability and into why you probably don't have enough Black social workers here in the first place. And then also understanding like, racial sensitivity training, biases, microaggressions, everything we've been talking about here, we also bring that to those institutions as well, agencies. So if you're interested, come talk to us. www.uphold318.com/BISWC or shoot us an email at biswc3@gmail.com.
Chris, James, anything?
My guy closed it perfectly. You know what I'm saying? We out here, you know what I'm saying? We got some things in the works. I'm just fortunate that, I could connect with people, you know what I'm saying, in social work, that are about the same thing, you know what I'm saying, that we're really trying to, not really just, for ourselves, but for the future of the field, you know what I'm saying? Like, we want it to look better, like we want real representation, you know what I'm saying? Like real things to happen, like we just don't blow smoke. Like we're trying to come and get people that really care that, there's Black faces in your organization and they need attention. You know what I'm saying? You can't just ignore them or say, oh, well, we had this trainer here last week. Like, no, like this is why your Black folks keep quitting these jobs or keep moving away from these jobs, So yeah.
Appreciate that, James.
No, man, I'm gonna leave it be.
He said the
follow-up info. You know what we're doing the work. Y'all go ahead and pick up the phone, send that email. Let's work.
Yes, sir. And on that note, please remember to subscribe, share, like, comment, leave a review, all that good stuff to help this amplify these voices and these brothers in social work, because it's needed, especially in the mental health realm, but all across the board in all of these different realms. And last but not least, always remember that this platform, this podcast has never been about being a replacement to therapy. It's an alternative place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.